The following episode will contain spoilers. You have been warned.
You're listening to Cinema IRL, the podcast that throws you into the movie and asks the question, what would you do? Now I know what happened to that robot I ordered. I hate when it gets stranded in the wilderness. I think Amber and Scott hate it too after discussing the wild robot. And now, Cinema IRL.
I wish I could switch places for just one day.
What would you do?
Put yourself in my shoes.
How do we handle this?
What would you do?
Put yourself in my position.
What would you do?
Now it's your turn.
I have 3 words for you.
Beep, bop, boop.
Male cow excrement.
Yes, that makes sense. That is your opener.
Wonderful kid language.
Yes, the wonder of animated films where they throw in little nuggets like that for the adults and lots of good fun for the kids. So this episode we are talking about The Wild Robot, which follows the journey of a robot, ROSM Unit 7134, ROS for short, that is shipwrecked on an uninhabited island and must learn to adapt to the harsh surroundings, gradually building relationships with the animals on the island and becoming the adoptive parent of an orphaned Gosling. That's not Ryan Gosling either.
I liked this movie, but I think it's terrible for our purposes.
Well, okay. So, yes, folks, what we do here is we talk what we would do if we were in the character shoes. And so as we were watching this film, I too was trying to pay special attention because, it didn't lend itself really well to what we do. But the one thing that I did see throughout the film that I thought was worth exploring is the robot, Roz. So she gets shipwrecked on this island. She is there to serve. She needs a task, and she needs to finish a task. Well, a bunch of animals there. They don't have any task for her to do. She doesn't understand the animals. The animals think she's an intruder. They attack her. So she hunkers down into, what was that mode? Learning mode or something like that.
Yeah, learning mode.
And she sits there quietly, and she watches all the animals doing the things to understand them, and ultimately harnesses the ability to hear them communicate because she's watched them enough in learning mode. So now she can hear them communicate. And as she's there, she accidentally tumbles into a nest and winds up being the parent to an egg who quickly hatches into one of our main characters, Bright Bill. Yeah. So the theme that kept coming up for Roz, which I thought would be interesting for us to explore, is when something is against your programming. She referenced many times, like, it is in her programming to have to complete a task, and she needs a task. And when she saw other animals doing certain things, and then she talked to the fox, who was their friend, fox named Fink, and then it would just be like, oh, well, that's in his programming. That's in his makeup.
It's what they are as a person or an animal.
Yeah. So I thought that's interesting because obviously Roz was not meant to be the parent to a young baby bird. She wasn't made to be a parent to anybody. She was made to completely focus on tasks, which doesn't require any sort of emotion, any sort of parenting skills or emotion or compassion or anything of that nature. But when put in this position to take care of this young Gosling, she has to modify her programming so she can do that successfully.
Yeah, I think modifying is putting it lightly.
Much so that she was almost broken by robot standards because she had to alter her programming so severely to be able to perform the task of taking care of this baby bird and making sure he's fed and can swim and can fly so he does not get stuck on the island when winter comes and dies.
I mean, the movie itself was a pretty obvious, I don't want to say they were definitely doing a giant analogy to being a parent, and I'd even say more specifically being a mom and the life cycle that you go through as one. Like, your kid comes in the world, you have no freaking clue what you're doing. There's no real manual. You just kind of have to figure it out a little bit. Like, when they go to leave, you have that whole empty feeling of like, what should I be doing? I don't have a task. What's my purpose? Why am I here? Like, it was a good. I liked this movie. I thought it was a good analogy for that. It was a little almost tear-jerking at times. Like, when Bright Bill flew off, you could see Roz was just so distraught. It's interesting. I find this interesting because I'm of the age that when I go on my Facebook, I have recently seen several of my friends who have just unloaded their child, many times their first child, off at college. They've flown the nest. They've migrated away. So it's a reminder that you sometimes have to shift. And I think my mom in particular is going to like this movie. And since I know she's going to listen to this episode, because once Bright Bill was gone, she needed a task. And it eventually was the task of saving everyone else around her. Like, she basically became like community mom, which
The community did not like her, still perceived her as a monster and an unwelcome inhabitant on the island.
yeah.
She found a way to serve them anyway.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, when you're a mom, like, whether or not the people you're mothering like you isn't relevant. Like, it's just, I mean, it'd be nice. Sure, it'd make life easier, it'd make life less emotionally hard, but you're not going to be like, that 4-year-old shit doesn't like me. Screw them. They're on their own.
Right. The idea, though, of your programming, that's something I want to get into a little bit, because it has the presumption that you are who you are. And obviously Roz found a way to adapt and modify her programming so she could be who she felt like she had to be. And I think a lot of people, even yourself included, as you just kind of jokingly said a couple minutes ago with an inside joke, sharing it with our audience, is, it's who someone is as a person. You always say that's who I am as a person. And you and I have had this discussion of like, yeah, it's who you act like as a person, but is it who you are as a person? And at what point can we use that to keep us stuck into who we are and how we act? Because we do have control of our actions. We do have control of our emotions. We have control of who we are. At any moment, we could decide to be someone we're not. Now, is that going to stick for 50 years? Probably not. But could it, with rehearsing that behavior and practicing that behavior and checking yourself in that behavior? Absolutely. We have control of changing our programming.
Yeah, and it's always a question as to whether or not you want to. Like, as you know, I do enjoy a good game of football. I like watching it. And it is unlikely that that's ever going to change. There's no real reason for it to change. And because I don't care to, yeah, that's who I am as a person. And I'm okay saying I'm a football fan. That's who I am as a person. But if we're talking about negatives, like, I don't know, like if you're a philanderer or something, you'd be like, I screw around. That's who I am as a person. No, that's because you don't want to be somebody better. You can choose to not. You can choose to not be a smoker. You can choose to not be a workaholic. You can choose to not be one of a billion things, but you have to make the choice that that's what you want to do. And many people don't, and they will hide behind that's who I am as a person. Now, sometimes it really is, and you just have to find ways. Like, I myself am rather on the ADHD side. That is who I am as a person. I am ADHD. I will always be ADHD. That doesn't mean I can't find ways to cope with it.
There's a difference.
And find ways to handle that, but it is part of my core identity.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem, is when people use things as their identity versus something that they experience or have waves of or have behaviors of. When you start using anything as your identity, especially if it's something that is difficult or challenging as a whole, I think that's definitely a problem, because once you make it your identity, then you're saying this is who I am, and I cannot possibly have any control to be any different. And for myself, I think that's a big fat cop-out.
Well, okay. Something can be part of your identity without being your entire identity. Like, if somebody's diabetic and they, like, let's go with type 1 diabetes in this case, not type 2. If you're type 1 diabetic, you're going to be a type 1 diabetic.
But there's a difference between saying, I'm a diabetic and I have diabetes. There is a difference. It might seem like word nitpicking, but there's a huge difference. It's the difference between I smoke versus I'm a smoker. That's when you say I am something, you enforce it so much to what your identity is. So when you say I'm I'm bipolar, I'm diabetic, I'm a smoker, whatever the thing is, and I would rather prefer to concentrate on the things you don't have control over, such as your medical situation, your physical medical situation.
Yes, that's my point. Is if you have, like, with your smoker analogy, sure, but with your diabetic analogy, I mean,
but I think that's true though. When you say I'm a diabetic.
It's
that
not
is
I'm a
different.
diabetic, woe is me. It's I'm a diabetic. That's just a freaking fact.
Yeah, it's the I am. I have diabetes. You can make the same accommodations for me if I say I have diabetes versus I'm a diabetic. Again, I'd rather not concentrate on the medical things that are not beyond that are beyond your control, and the things that are like I'm a procrastinator. I'm a smoker. I'm a failure. I'm a philanderer, as you just said. When the things that you do have control over, and let's leave the physical medical stuff at the door. But when you use that word I am, it does make it your identity, and therefore, how could you possibly change your programming if you have made that so intertwined with your existence?
I mean, again, I'm not completely buying that on. I mean, okay, yes. I guess if we take the medical stuff out of it and we're just looking at I'm a smoker, I'm a procrastinator, I'm a philanderer, all of that, yes, I'll actually agree with you on that one. That language is, if you're a smoker, you're not going to quit smoking. But if you smoke some cigarettes, you can quit smoking.
Yeah, and it goes back to if you were a smoker and you stop smoking and someone offers you a cigarette, you can then say, no, I'm not a smoker, because now that's how you're thinking of yourself as I'm not a smoker.
They should say, no, I don't smoke cigarettes.
They should, but it's the same person who said I'm a smoker.
Well, I know
so
that's...
I am a smoker versus I'm not a smoker. They're going to use that same language, and most people aren't aware of how that phrase I am really reinforces to you who you are, for better or for worse. Words create worlds.
Yeah, you and I have had this conversation off air plenty of times. I think a lot of times you're right. I think there are times you're not. But I will agree with the point in general, and especially for the vast majority of people. You often are what you say you are. So if you say you're something bad, you're going to be something bad. If you say you're something good, you're going to be something good. There's a reason that these companies that make these daily affirmation cards, like, why they can stay in business, because
affirmations are mostly a bunch of BS, in my opinion. You can tell yourself I'm wealthy, I am beautiful, whatever it is, and if number one you don't believe it, or number two it's absolutely not true, you check yourself in your brain to say it's not true. You can say, I'm wealthy, I'm abundant, and you could be living in your car digging food out of the garbage. You're not wealthy or abundant, and that's just a bunch of hooey to say that you are.
But not every single affirmation is necessarily going to be the right one for you. I mean, like, it's the whole, if you say something enough, eventually you'll believe it. Or if you hear something enough, eventually you'll believe it. And so I am successful. I am energetic. I am fun-loving.
Okay, so
you can't have it both ways. You can't be saying that the negative things make you that person, but trying to do it positive can't.
I'm saying you shouldn't use either. So if you just say I'm energetic, what if you're not? You can say I'm energetic all you want, but you still might have fatigue or, some sort of symptoms that make you're not freaking energetic.
Sure, fine. Go through the deck.
However,
pull the ones that don't apply.
However, if you come up with an affirmation that says something like, I make the best use of the spurts of energy I have in my day. Like, that's actually based in reality. You might have spurts of energy. Anyone who doesn't have energy will likely have at least a spurt here and there. And if you say, I make the most of the spurts of energy I have to get stuff done or something like that, that's based in reality. To say I'm energetic and you're actually not, or you have a physical ailment that prevents you from being energetic, you can say I'm energetic all you want. It's not true.
Well, no, because it's one of those things it's a sliding scale. What might be energetic for one person might be sloth-like for somebody else. And maybe your energetic is just compared to where you've been. Like,
I would have to just still need to come up with something that's
boys
based
and girls,
in
the
reality.
last thing you should start doing is comparing yourself to other people in this world. It is
You compare to others for possibility.
it is a fantastic way to make yourself miserable.
But again, I'm going to disagree with you here. You compare yourself to others for possibility. If you just say, I want what they have, I want what they have, I want what they have, you're a bitter, unhappy person. However, if you look at someone who is a couple steps ahead of you, who is, if you're trying to be, the director of the company and you're the manager, you look to that person for possibility, saying, wow, Sarah started out at the, 6 months before I did, and she's a director now. If she can do it, I can do it.
Well, yeah, but that's someone you look up to, you admire,
No,
not somebody you compare to.
You don't have to look up or admire Sarah at all, but you can say if she started 6 months before me and she just got appointed to director, it's possible. If she can do it, I can do too. Screw Sarah. You don't have to like her.
Well, yes, but again, that's not what the word comparison means.
No, you're comparing to where they are. I'm comparing myself. Why are you shaking your head at me? You're comparing yourself to where Sarah is, what Sarah has for possibility.
You could compare your situation now to what Sarah's situation was 6 months ago, but you're not comparing you to Sarah. You're just not.
I don't know what you're talking about. It doesn't matter where you were 6 months ago and where Sarah was 6 months ago. I'm talking about now and in the future. Who cares about the past? That's not what I'm talking about.
You just said, oh, look where Sarah is now. I can get there.
Yeah.
You're comparing where you are now,
yes, now
versus
and in the future.
Where Sarah was 6 months ago, and you're saying these are two similar situations. If Sarah can have been here 6 months ago and she's ended up where she is now, then I can be where I am now and end up there in 6 months. Yes, you look to their past to help shape your present. Yes, but you're not comparing you to Sarah. You're comparing.
I'm just saying comparison isn't always bad if you look at it to compare yourself for possibilities of what's possible. Just keep it on the positive side, other than just being bitter and angry that someone had a vacation or someone went somewhere.
Let's go scroll Facebook and see what we can compare to.
Why would I do that?
Well, you wouldn't, because it's actually been shown to be rather harmful mentally.
Really destructive. Yeah. Social media is one of the worst things to happen to society.
Yes, because you look at that and you see that's when you're actually comparing. Because you're comparing right now.
Yeah, I don't do that.
Your right now to my right now, then that's a comparison. And that can get unintentionally toxic.
If you look at it that way, a lot of people cannot. They'll look at someone's Facebook post and they'll say, "Oh, that's great for you," and then they'll mutter behind their phone at home saying, they don't deserve that, or why, she doesn't, she cheats on her husband, or they can't really afford that, or why do they have that and I don't? Like, so many people do that. It's sad because social media amplifies that in people. But if you put a twist on it saying,
I think we saw the wild robot, and we've now just had the wild episode. We are kind of off the rails at this point.
No, I don't think so. It all has to do with your programming, and that was what I wanted to discuss for this episode was programming, because everything about Roz was that she was able to fulfill the need of Bright Bill, that she was able to function as a mom, that she was able to complete her task of making sure he was fed and could swim and could fly, because she modified her programming, because she wasn't made to do any of those things. So we're right on task.
Yes, I'm not made to be an editor, so if we stop now, I don't have to be much of one. Any final thoughts?
Nope, I'm good. Have a great day, everyone.
Male cow excrement.
We hope you enjoyed our episode. Thank you for listening. And to catch all the new episodes, please subscribe. We release 2 to 3 episodes weekly, so we'll have new content regularly. Until next time.